Welcome to the All Things Admin Admin Tech Crash Course. My name is Julie Perrine. I'm the founder and CEO of All Things Admin, and we are excited to have all of you joining us for today's presentation. The Admin Tech Crash Course is a technology-focused training program for busy professionals. Our goal with each session is to create a crash course on the relevant technology topics that you need to stay current on the technology and software that you use each day so that you can be more productive and proficient in everything you do. Today's topic, become a Microsoft Excel Formulas Pro, presented by one of our favorite technology instructors, Donna Gilliland of Most Training. Donna's career in technology began back when DOS was the king of computer operating systems for the personal computer. Floppies were actually floppy, and the internet had just begun to explode. At that time in her career, there were no training companies. You either learned it on your own or went back to school to learn it, and Donna did both. Donna's career in the corporate world started as an executive assistant. She worked in a programming department supporting a staff of programmers and the VP of IT, but that was just the beginning. Over time, she realized that she had an aptitude for learning software technologies and the ability to communicate in terms that everyone could understand. And her love of helping people, business, and technology made a fantastic fit for her future career and training today. Today, Donna is an award-winning technology instructor, certified technology trainer, and the president of Most Training. Please join me in a warm virtual welcome for Donna Gilliland. Welcome, Donna.
Oh, thank you, Julie. I'm really looking forward to helping everybody get better at their formula writing. So you should be able to see my screen now, which is a very small Excel spreadsheet. And if you've read the objectives that Julie has published on her website, you know that your list of objectives for your part 1 is to learn the difference between relative and absolute cell referencing and writing a formula. That's such an important concept. And I remember the first time I ever learned that, it sort of threw me for a loop as I've learned that it does still, after 20 years, that is with students, still have that same issue. So I think that when you leave after this power hour, that if you didn't have a clear understanding before, you should after this. And you'll learn about function formula syntax, and that's why we say beyond the AutoSum, because not everything is going to be as simple as double-clicking AutoSum to add up everything. So you'll get your first taste today working with function formulas, and there are around 14 categories of functions in Microsoft Excel, and within each one of those categories there are a large number of functions. So you'll learn also today about an if function, which comes out of the logical category. You'll learn about a statistical function, COUNTIF, then two text functions, actually, proper and concatenate, and a financial function, PMT, and then a brief look at the today function. You will learn to use date functions a little bit more in the part 2, because I'm going to show you how to create a time sheet in the second run that we do, and then of course you'll learn more about other function types. So we'll get started right now. The first thing, if you want to follow along, that's fine. If you want to follow some of this on your own computer, that is up to you. If that is what you're going to do, at the very bottom of your screen you see a blue flower representing Go to Webinar, and clicking that button will toggle you back and forth between my screen and your screen. So if you want to do some of this hands-on, one of the things I want you to do is to take a look at the formulas ribbon, so whether on my screen or on yours. And I'm in Office 2013, and if you're using Office 2007, Excel, or 2010, then you have this ribbon layout. And formulas, Microsoft gave us a quick way to get to some of the common categories of functions. So at the moment, I just want you to take a quick look with me at the formulas ribbon, and you can see on the formulas ribbon you've got that favorite button that we all like, is the AutoSum for adding up numbers, and then a recently used, and then you have the financial function category. So when I click, you can see, wow, a lot of functions just in that one category, just in the one category. And then the logical function as you can see, the list is not as large as the list is, say, for financials, and the one that you will learn today is the if function. Then there's a text function category, quite large there as well, and you will learn about the concatenate function today, and then others in part 2. Date and time functions, lookup and reference, math and trig. You'll be glad to know we're not doing math and trig today, or in our part 2 either. Now, that's not all the categories of functions. You have the button for more functions where you can get to the other categories that Microsoft Excel offers. So just wanted you to take an abbreviated look at the formulas ribbon. It's not that you have to work from the formulas ribbon to get to these. There are other ways to get to the functions. More about that coming. So if you are following along on your own computer, you can just return back to the home ribbon if you like. So let's get started first with just a review of the AutoSum, and then we'll quickly get out of those basics into something else. So as you look at my spreadsheet, I've got some things already set up for us, and as part of this spreadsheet, you will learn about the difference between relative and absolute cell referencing. So let's just get started with AutoSum as your base point. I want to add up all the numbers in the total column, and as long as your numbers are all together horizontally or vertically, then AutoSum is great for doing a quick summation. Other things to keep in mind about AutoSum is that if there are any numbers above text, for example, here's the total, and I am in cell G7, and if I were attempting to add up numbers from above, Excel's going to stop with text. In other words, if text is in the way, it won't grab what's above there. So I want to add up all these numbers very quickly, and in the editing group on the home ribbon, you have AutoSum, and if you double click, that will automatically give you your total without you having to let me see what's wrong with my screen here, just a moment. Because one single click of your AutoSum actually gives you the formula, where a double click of AutoSum adds up all the numbers. So let me get up here and see what's going on. See, one single click gives me the formula. The reason why you would want to do one over the other is, one, if I know I just want to add up all these numbers and not modify the formula in any way, then double clicking just bypasses me seeing the formula. A single click, I need, for example, these might be sales numbers for someone, and I want to add them all up and then multiply by a percentage that's in another cell. Therefore, I would just want to click once. I can see the formula, and then I could add to it, as in the case I might want to multiply by a cell that has a value in it. And of course, this one is just a trial run. Let me go ahead and finish out the sum. A quick tip for you about the summing, or actually the copying of a formula. If you are copying vertically, and right now I realize that you don't have many rows of information, but in the real world, you and I have huge spreadsheets within some companies, and you may have several thousand rows of numbers that you're wanting to AutoSum. You certainly don't want to go to each one and double click. So now here's the power tip. If you are copying a formula vertically, then you can use the autofill. That is the small square that's in the lower right corner of every active cell. And right now I'm approaching my active cell G7 in the lower right, and as I approach, I get a black plus sign, and it has to be that symbol. And since I'm copying this formula vertically, double clicking will copy it all the way down. If you were copying horizontally a formula, you would have to click and drag with the black plus sign. The reason why that I have zeros in G11 and G12 is because Excel detects that there is something in that row, and there is. There's a text of total and net income, and that's why I'm getting the zeros. Now, if I want to add up vertically, same thing, so just an AutoSum. Always you'll need to be in the place where you want to add up numbers. And mine is giving me grief today. and then I can just drag across. Now I realize that at this point we're about 5 minutes into the webinar, and some of you may already know these very basic elementary things, but in about another 5 minutes the speed will pick up for you. Now here are some things I want you to keep in mind before I get you into explaining what the differences are between absolute and relative cell referencing. First, I want to eliminate these formulas for a reason, and I'm going to put some notes on the screen. And in that handout that Julie sent you just moments ago, this information is probably on your page 2, but I'm going to write this as a note on the screen for you. These are some rules that you need to keep in mind when the time comes that you actually have to write formulas. This will be very important for you. All right, here are rules for you to keep in mind. Number 1, Excel has no idea that you are performing a calculation until you start with an equal sign. In the case of the AutoSum, there was no need for that because Excel's automatically creating the formula for us, which, by the way, is a sum function. You can't have any spaces in a formula, and when you do have to write a function formula, it does require that the cell addresses that you are performing the function on be in parentheses. For example, the one you're learning today. So if I have something like this, you'll always have to have a matching number of parentheses, open and closed. You will get to learn one nested function in your training today. More about that in a moment. So just remember, colon is for consecutive order, and know that you can combine consecutive and non-consecutive together by using a comma. See, if I do this, comma W20, that's telling Excel to go out to W20, get whatever value is there, and add it to the result. So in this one, I am combining consecutive, the colon, and non-consecutive, which is the value in W20. So these are rules that you want to keep in mind. And here's one more rule to keep in mind, is that Excel, so this is just something for you to remember, Excel follows math precedent order, and I'll demonstrate so you'll know, because it'll only take once of you not doing this correctly and getting a wrong value, and you won't forget. Here's what I mean. I'm going to put a sample on the screen for you. If I had this formula, and the asterisk is for multiplication, for those of you that may be fairly new and you're not certain about the math operators, plus, of course, addition, minus subtraction. The asterisk is for multiplication, and the / located on the question mark is going to be for division. But here's this simple formula, and feel free to put this in the chat window if you want. Now, if this formula, if I had a 5 in C2, a 5 in D3, and I had a 10 in W20, based upon the way the formula reads right now, if you want, you can put into the chat box what you think it is. And I'll give you maybe 15 seconds to tell me what you think that is. This is assuming that 5 is in C2, 5 is in D3, and a 10 is in W20. What do you think the answer would be that Excel returns? So do we have any takers yet, Julie?
Is 55 correct?
All right, so if someone wrote that it's 55, they are correct. And the reason that it is correct is because since Excel follows math precedent order, Excel is going to multiply first. And this is very important because that may not be your intention. And keep this in mind, the default behavior in Excel is to calculate from left to right of the formula you've created unless there's a math precedent order. Remember those old days in elementary school when we did algebra and you had a formula and it had parentheses, and it was a combination of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. What was done first in the formula? And the highest order in that math was the parentheses. So you need to keep that in mind in your formulas, because see, C2 in D3 could be me adding up the first and second quarter sales of a sales agent, and then I am multiplying their commission percentage, which might be in W20. So in this case, I want Excel to add up that agent's sales numbers from first and second quarter in C2 and D3, and to force the addition for it to be performed first, you're going to need parentheses. So see, now Excel will add first, and then it will multiply. So these basic things are very important to you being able to write formulas at a higher level, and you'll get into a higher level in our part 2 as well. So keep those things in mind. I'm going to move that box, and we're going to talk about relative versus absolute cell referencing. Let me put in another box here. And all of this is in your handout that you were sent earlier. Such an important concept. Now, the default behavior in Excel is relative referencing. Here's what this means. When you look at your spreadsheet, of course, you've got column letters running across, and you've got row numbers running down. Now, thinking about that layout will help you, I think, better understand why Excel does what it does when you copy a formula down versus across. If you copy a formula down the screen, vertically down the screen, Microsoft Excel is going to increment the row number. It's never going to change the column letter. It's only going to pick up a new row number, because that's what we're doing. We're changing location from one row to another, and Excel is going to pick up the numbers in the row that we have the calculation referring to. Whereby if you copy a formula across, then Excel is going to change the column letter. So that's relative referencing, whereas absolute cell referencing, I'm going to go ahead and move this first box. Absolute cell referencing is when you do not want Excel to change the perhaps column or row number. For example, here's this first formula I did moments ago using AutoSum. And I'll go ahead and open up the formula by double-clicking this cell that has the number, or you can also click in your formula bar to bring up the formula. Now, here's the formula. I've got it in edit mode, and it is summing the supplies for this 5-month period, B7 through F7. When this formula is copied down, Excel is going to increment the row number. And on the way down, it will not, in the next row, it won't be B7 colon F7, it will become B8 colon F8, because that's the row the office supplies are in. So Excel's always going to change relative to where you copy to, whether that's row-wise or column-wise. So I'll go ahead and copy this one down. I'll drag on this one. And I'll go ahead and open this one up for row 8, and see it's picked up a new row number but maintained column position. Now that's going to work differently where the total is concerned. The total, the first one I have here, is adding up all the numbers in January, B7 through B10. This one needs to be copied to the right so I can pick up the grand total for February, March, April, etc. And that would be a horizontal copy. Your letters run horizontal. So when I do go back and copy that across, I'll go ahead and do that. And let's look at the second one from where I copied, and see it's picking up column C. And if you copy again to the right, it picks up column D, but it's maintaining column position. So all of that's relative referencing, but there will come a time when you need Excel to maintain focus on a specific cell, and that's absolute cell referencing. So let me show you what I mean. And also, if you're not looking at your handout, and I'll put this in my notes box here, you're going to use a $sign to tell Excel that whatever row number that $sign is preceding, or whatever column letter that $sign is preceding, that is an absolute cell reference. For example, if I have a formula like this, and I'm going to do one here, you can do it with me if you like, but if you have a formula like this one, this is equal C5 times F $1. And if I were going to copy the formula down, you've already learned that coming down, the row number is going to change. So C5 would become C6, but F1 would still be F1 because of the $sign preceding the row number. And let me show you an example, so you can see how it works. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and leave this as a product list. So if I had an iPad mini and a cover for the iPad, a keyboard, amount $599, and the tax rate where I'm at is 10% in the city that I'm in. And just imagine for a moment that you had 2,000 of these items that you're tracking. I just want to create the formula once and then copy it down that 2,000 times if I needed it. Here you would be writing a formula, and it would be a multiplication formula. So I want to take, I'm starting with the equal because AutoSum's not involved, and I have to manually do the formula, equal, and rather than type B4, I can just click B4 and then multiply, and I want to multiply by the 10%, which is in G1. So based upon what you've just learned, and I haven't modified the formula yet because it does need to be modified before I copy, and if you want to type in the chat box and tell me what you think needs to be modified, and do I need to use a $sign, and if so, where? You can go ahead and be putting that in if you want to participate, and I'll be talking along the way. So if I leave this like it is and press enter, I will be given the correct total for the, or tax, actually that should be total tax, so I'll change it in just a moment. I'd be given the correct tax on $599. The problem would come into play when I go to copy the formula down, because based upon relative referencing coming vertical, Excel will change the row number on the second and succeeding ones. So on the next copy, B4 would become B5, picking up the cover amount, which that's perfect. But G1 would become G2, and if you look back at my spreadsheet, there is nothing in G2. And something times nothing, we're going to get nothing on those other two. Of course, it'd be great if we had no tax rate on those others, but here's how it would work. This formula needs to read this way. It needs to read equal B4 times G $1. This makes certain that Excel will never multiply against any cell other than G1. Now, a little tip, which I think is in your handout as well. If you don't want to type the $signs, function key F4 in Microsoft Excel produces $signs initially on the column, letter, and row number, but each time you press function key F4 while in edit mode of the formula, it will cycle the $key elsewhere, maybe off of the G and onto the 1, and that's if you do not want to type it. You can use function key F4 to cycle the keys, dollar symbol where you need it to be. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And as I said, that one would be right anyway. That needs to be tax here. And then I'll use the autofill square black plus sign, double click to bring my tax rate down. And if I open this one up, the second one, you can see that it has gone from row 4 to row 5, and I have B5, but it's multiplying against G1 rather than G2. Now in this case, this formula that I'm demonstrating here, the proper term for this formula is mixed reference. It's mixed reference because one part of the formula is relative, no dollar signs. That would be the B4. Whereby $1 is an absolute reference, and that's why it's called a mixed reference. One part is relative, one part is absolute. Now, as far as the total goes, that's easy. I just want to add the two numbers together, and that would be AutoSum. And then from there, it's just a copy down of the formula. And as I work on this, if you have questions, be sure to put it in the question box because we'll answer it at the end. But so, did we have anyone come up with the right answer? Whether we need a dollar sign or not? I hope.
The guess was to put a dollar sign somewhere in that equation. The question that did pop in here, though, is when do you put a dollar sign after the number also, the cell number? So you put it after the G, and I know I've seen some equations where sometimes there's a dollar sign like after the number as well. Is that correct?
No, the dollar sign, and it's a good question. Here's how you decide where your dollar sign is going to be and whether or not the dollar sign needs to be on both column letter as well as row number. If I'm going to use a formula, in fact, you're going to see this in place in part 2 when we use VLOOKUP. If I have a formula I'm creating and I'm going to copy it across as well as down, and I need it to maintain the column position and the row position, then I do need a dollar sign in both places. Now, if you're wondering why don't I put a dollar sign in front of G now as well as the 1, you could. You won't see, it won't impact anything because when you're copying down, Excel is never going to change the reference to the column letter because you're not going column wise, you're going row wise. So even if you did put a dollar sign in front of the G in addition to the one preceding the row, you wouldn't see any difference. It wouldn't hurt anything. It's just not necessary. What's necessary is that that dollar, in our case, be preceding the 1. Now, where it would become a problem for you is if you plan to use that formula also in a copy across and you wanted the column letter to change as it came across, then having a dollar sign in front of it would be problematic. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so this looks good and everything's working right. And that's why I was saying earlier, the understanding of relative and absolute cell referencing is very critical to writing formulas. And this won't be your last look at it either because I'll be using it again, but in more detailed formulas in our part 2. So I'm glad you're getting to come to part 2. All right, so now let me go back to our formula basics spreadsheet that's working with. And before I go over any more formulas, which we've got plenty to do here, is that I want to make certain that you understand why you need to use paste special with formulas. For example, these totals are the result of a formula. The totals going horizontal, the totals going vertical. They're the result of a formula. Now, if you copy data to another spreadsheet and the data you're copying is the result of a calculation and you're not bringing the supporting data with it, you're going to get a pound ref message. So in a moment, when we use the concatenate formula, I'm going to demonstrate an example of why you need to use paste special when you're copying values out of a formula versus just paste. So that's coming up. All right, so let's get started with your logical function, because again, you're going to learn one logical function, one statistical, two text, a financial. So let's get started with the logical part. And I will go to another sheet for this. Let's see here. Find one for us. And feel free to put in names that you want if you want to practice with this. It's entirely up to you. I'll use some of these names for our spreadsheet. just so we have something. And I'm glad to supply you with these files as well if you'd like. Just so we have some names. All right, here we go. And I'm going to put in some numbers, and I'm going to let Excel do the rest for me. Now what I'm doing is, in order to speed this up, I've got two numbers in here for these two employees, and I want Excel to increment by 5,000 on the way down for me so I don't have to continue typing. So this is a little power trick if you have never used it before. When you select two numbers in Microsoft Excel and you use your autofill, then Excel will increment the number accordingly in terms of what the difference is between the numbers. So I'm copying down, and Excel's incrementing by 5,000 all the way down. So that's just a little power tip for you. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the if function that is in your handout. And keep in mind that every function that you work with has its own syntax, which simply means the order in which you write that formula, the parts, the order that it should be written in. Now, when you write the if function has three required parts: the logical test, what you should do, what you want it to do if it's true, and what you want it to do if it's false. So here's what we're going to do with this one, because right now it may not make sense at all hearing that explanation, but to see is a whole different story. But first, let me just put this up here for you. And then remembering that if is a logical function. So this is the order, what you want it to do, what you want it to test for, and what you want it to do if it's true versus false. So now, here is our example. I want to test for these sales folks, and like I said, I could have 2,000 of them. I want to test for whether or not anybody in this team that they've sold greater than 270,000 in sales. And if that's true, I want them to get a 6% commission. But if it's false, then they're only going to get a 3% commission. And we're going to use a formula to calculate all of that out. So imagine that you did have 2,000 of these names. This is going to take the manual effort of evaluating out, and you're going to have it done for you automatically by virtue of a formula. So when you type in the equal sign in a formula, and then, which is always your starting point, and you type the name of the function first, after the equal sign is typed, and you then put in the letter of the function, Excel engages the auto list of functions. And if you see your function in the list, you can simply double click. If you don't, you can keep typing the letters to get the function to appear rather than having to scroll through a big list. Now, in this one, if is right there, and it also tells you when you hover, like as I'm doing now, that it checks whether a condition is met and returns one value of true and another of false, which I've already described. But if I double click, Excel will do two things. One, it finishes typing the name of the function and gives us the initial open paren. And I want to slow down on this part because I want you, if you are someone that's not writing formulas yet, but you're about to, I want you to get used to paying attention to the help that pops up when you hit that first open paren. Excel will always tell you what should come first, what should be second, what should be third or fourth, whatever, however many parameters there are to the formula. So now with the open paren engaged, I'm seeing in bold that Excel wants to know what I'm testing for. Now after that, there's a comma, and then there are two options of value of true, value of false, but I want you to notice that in this particular function, those two items, value of true, value of false, are bracketed. Anytime you see brackets on an argument that you need to put in, It means that it is not required. So see, I could actually use the if function just to test for whether or not what I'm testing for is true or if it's false. But in our case, I want it to do something very specific. So I'm going to make use of those optional parameters. And I'm going to go ahead and give it the logical test. Well, we're testing for whether or not there's anybody in this team of people who've sold more than 270,000. The first person is Antonio, and the first number to be tested is in cell B2, which you can either type or click. So as you look at the help, it shows me that after I give the logical test, which is going to be greater than 270,000, that I should put in a comma. It shows the comma being after logical test. So I'll put in a comma. Think about your comma this way. The comma is the trigger to Excel that you're ready to go on and tell Excel what to do second. And in this function, what to do second is to specify what it should do if this test proves true. Well, if it proves true, we said we want them to get a 6% commission. Well, 6% has to be multiplied by something, and that something is Antonio's number, which is in B2. And again, I will click B2 and tell it what to do with B2, which is to multiply by 6%. You can also type in decimal values as well. And then as you look at help, it shows that there's a comma after value of true and before value of false. So I need to put in that comma. And then see how it's bolding the last thing, value of false? Each time I hit that comma, Excel's moving on to the next help piece and bolding and telling you what to do. The reason why I'm stressing this so much is because quite often when we write formulas, we're not writing them every day. It's a little bit like programming in a way. The more detailed the formula becomes in your writing it, is that we create our formulas to do our calculations, and it might be 6 months before we have to use a certain function anymore. And you know how that goes. 6 months out of sight, out of mind, you're going to forget what comes first, second, third, etc. And that's why looking at the help will jog your memory because you're being shown what to do. All right, so B2 times 6% is what I want to do if it's true. I have my comma, and that only leaves what to do if it's false. Well, if they don't sell more than 270,000, they're only going to get 3%. As I'm looking at mine, I've got 27,000 up there. I'll fix that for us in just a moment. Times 3 and percent sign, comma. Let me fix this so that I have 270,000. So there's the formula. Testing for B2 greater than 270,000. And if true, give them 6%. Otherwise, 3%. So I get 7,650. And we're referring to the cell reference because when we copy down, we want it to pick up another row. Leanne's in row 3, and I want it to pick up Leanne's number. I'm going to use the shortcut, lower right corner, autofill, black plus sign, double click, and now it's gone down row after row after row, picking up a new number and testing again for what we want. Now, know that you can test for multiple things by using multiple ifs that are nested together. That's not something you'll learn today, but just know that through the nesting of functions, I could have multiple tests within my formula. So hopefully that makes sense. So there's your first look at using a logical function. So now the next one we're going to do is a statistical function. A statistical function. I'm going to use this back in this spreadsheet called promotion sales. And what I want to do in this spreadsheet, and keep this in mind too, even though I'm doing these formulas in the same sheet, you can create these formulas across multiple sheets. I could be in a completely different sheet to create the formula, which you will be doing in part 2. All right, so here's what I want to know on this one. I just want to know how many times does the word yes appear in range I2 through I200. So I'm going to put in J1 total yes just as a title. And here's the formula. And again, it is a statistical function. Equal count, and see up comes the auto list. I can see COUNTIF. Notice that there's one beneath it that says COUNTIFs. That's because you can specify more than one criterion in using COUNTIF. So the purpose of COUNTIF, and I'll double click COUNTIF to get the formula going with the word and the open paren. And see, there are only two parameters for COUNTIF, the range and the criteria. So from this point, I have to tell Excel, here's the range that has the word yes in it, and I want you to find out how many times the word yes appears, which would be the criteria, the word yes. Well, the first thing is I've got to identify the range, and that begins at I2. And here's a little tip for you. Rather than me have to click, hold, and drag all the way down to this long range, you could pre-select using the keyboard. So it's just a little side power tip. And now that I've got that first cell selected, my power tip for selecting sequentially without dragging is the Control key, the Shift key. Just think about the fact that the Shift key does a sequential selection. Control, Shift, combined, tap the down arrow, and see it selected all the way to the last occupied cell, and I didn't have to click and drag. Now that's the range, is I2 through I200. In fact, you can see my formula up in the formula bar, so I could just click in the formula bar and put in the comma because that's what's required after range, and then I'm looking for the word yes. It's text, so that would be open quote, the word yes, close quote, and then close paren. That's all that function requires. Range, location, and what you are counting for within that location. Now press the enter key, and there it is. It tells me that the word yes appears 102 times in that range. So COUNTIF is a statistical function. Hopefully it's all making sense to you, and hopefully you are thinking about ways you can use these functions in your work. And you know, even if the two we've covered so far, we've got a few more to go, even if these two aren't ones you would use right now, at minimum it should help you have a better understanding of writing function formulas. All right, let's move on to using a text function called concatenate. I'm going to use it in this spreadsheet. Here's the goal. Concatenate is a text function, and it is used to join more than one column of text together. So our goal in this spreadsheet is I would like to combine the first name and the last name together in a column of its own, which you can do with a function. And in this case, I want the column to be where E is. A quick way to insert a column at E is right-click the letter E, choose Insert, and here's my column. And I'm going to put in the word full name, and then we will use concatenate. Now I'm going to slow down a little bit on this one because this one is going to require some parts that aren't in the help that pops up. For example, I do want to join the first name and the last name together, or for that matter, you could even flip it. You could have it pull the last name in first, followed by the first name. But either way, I need there to be a space in between those two names. I might even want a comma and a space. Either way, the formula doesn't have that built in. You have to put it into the formula. So keep this in mind when you are writing a function formula that requires a literal space be placed in a cell, or something literal like a character of a comma. Those literals have to be in an open, closed quotation. So here's how it works. You will start with an equal as usual, and CON puts me right at the top of the list with concatenate, and rather than have to finish typing it, I'll just double click, and then here comes my open paren. It's already there, and it pops help. So help is telling me that the first thing I need to do is specify where is that first piece of text I want to bring in. And in this case, I'm going to bring in the first thing first, and that would be a matter of clicking cell B2. Now looking back at my formula, looking back at the help that's popped up, after text 1 and prior to text 2 is a comma, because that's a requirement in separating the parts of the formula. So I'll put in a comma. Now here's where it gets special in that, one, your help doesn't tell you how to do this. So this is the part where I need a literal space to occur between the first and last name, and that literal is going to have to go in quotations. So I would start by typing in a quotation mark, then pressing the space bar is going to give me that literal space, and then I need to cap with a close quote. And now what's inside the quotations is what Excel will return to my cell. Now in case you're thinking, how do I get a comma? Well, after you typed in the first open quote, then type the literal comma and be sure to press the space bar so you have a space after the comma, and then cap off with a close quote. So now I just wanted the space. I've got that handled inside the quotations, and now I'm going to put in a comma, and I'm ready to tell Excel where the next piece of text is I want to bring in. And that's going to be the last thing, which is C2. And then, of course, I need to cap with a closed parentheses. So here's the formula as it stands. Now I'll press Enter. Let's have a, I don't think I've typed anything. I don't see anything wrong. Let's see. Oh, it must be, this must be a protected spreadsheet that I'm in. So let me see if I can do this elsewhere. Let's see here. Oh, I see what it is. Just one moment. I'll fix it for us. In case you're wondering, what is she doing? It's a data validation that's here, and you will actually learn data validation in part 2. So I'm just removing this restriction that's been set in this column. So don't worry about what all I'm doing. Just know that I am taking off a previously set restriction to entering something in this column. And you'll learn all about that in part 2. Okay, there we go. Let's try this again. Now, I won't repeat what I was doing because I've already explained that. Let me just get the formula in. B2, comma, open quote, space bar, close quote, comma. Let's bring in the last name. Now, no more error message because there's no more restriction on that column. So there, the two names are combined, and there is a space between the name. And then that double click of the autofill is sure going to come in handy now. And there are all the names combined together. And this is a good lead-in before we go to the next text function. This is a good lead-in to using Paste Special. I want those full names in another spreadsheet, or it could be that you don't want column B and C anymore. You just want to retain it this way. Just remember this. If I eliminated column B and C, it would then cause an error message in E because the supporting data isn't there anymore. So when you want to keep information in static form, meaning that it's not tied to a formula anymore, you have to copy and then paste special the values. Here's how it would work. I want these names, I don't want them to be tied to a formula anymore. The first thing is to get all that information selected. Then the rest can be done with a right click. I can right click the area and choose copy. That's a required step to get it copied. And then I can right click, and of the paste options, there's one for 1, 2, 3, which is to retrieve the values from the formula. I'll choose 1, 2, 3, and then when you look in my formula bar up at the top, there is no reference to concatenate anymore because I just stripped the formula completely out and I'm left with the static information. So if I were to copy that information to another spreadsheet, there would be no #ref message when I didn't bring its supporting data with it. Or if I were to eliminate columns B and C, I would still be able to maintain what I derived from my formula. And so now let's move into another text function. All right, let's see here. We'll use this one, this spreadsheet. Now in this one, you're going to learn actually how to nest two functions together. Proper is a text function, and proper, when used by itself, proper is used to uppercase the first letter of each name that you would be bringing in. For example, if I had, I'll just come over here as that sample. If I have this, let me do this in lowercase. And if I had 1,000 of these names all the way down that were not properly cased, or you may be in that situation where you've inherited a spreadsheet where the user of the spreadsheet, sometimes they typed in all capitals, sometimes it was a combination of upper and lower case, it's just a mess, and you need to clean it up. Then equal proper, and even though I'm typing in capital, I want you to know that Excel is not case sensitive when it comes to typing the function names. I will choose E1, and then a close parentheses. I'm telling Excel that I want to take the contents of E1 and have it properly cased. And then see, now the D in Donna is capital, as is the G, and if I had 1,000 of those names over there in E, and I could copy this formula down, and it would pick up each one, and then it would clean it up. And see, this is a prime example of another reason to use Paste Special, because once I clean that up and I get those 1,000 names cleaned up, I can't come over here and delete E. I mean, I can, but it gives me an error message because it's looking for that supporting data, and that is why you would want to copy all those properly cased names and Paste Special their values before you eliminated the supporting range. All right, so now the next one is you learning how to combine two functions together to accomplish one thing. We're going to combine that text function proper with the text function concatenate, because as you can see, all these names here on the left, they're all in lowercase. The goal here is combine the first and last name together, but have them properly cased. So I'm going to put in equal proper, open paren, and I'm going to slow down for a moment on this. Keep in mind that, as I stated before, every function has to have an open close parentheses. I'm about to use two functions, so that's going to mean there will be two open parentheses because there are two functions, and I will have to end with two close parentheses. So now I've got equal proper, and then I'm going to put in the next function. So I'm saying that I want it to also concatenate. So here are my two parentheses, equal proper, open paren, and I want it to properly case what I'm about to concatenate, join together. I want to bring in the person's first name, and then I'll follow the same procedure we followed earlier, a comma. I do need a space, open quote, press the space bar, close quote. I need a comma to signal Excel I want to tell it what to do next, which is bring in the last name, and I need two close parens because I have two functions with two open parens. And look, they are joined as one and they are properly cased. So that is an example of nesting more than one function together to accomplish one task in one formula, or rather a formula that's using two functions. And then I'll just copy it down, and everything is properly cased and joined together. All right, let's do a payment function, which I think that's probably going to wind us up. Now, I was going to just demonstrate the, I'll do this real quick, the today function, because I've got more planned for you where this function is concerned. So the equal today is to generate the current day's date. And if you save your spreadsheet and open it back up tomorrow, it would automatically generate the current date. So that's just one sample of a date and time function. And when we get together on part 2, we're going to do a time sheet with a more detailed formula. So here's the detail we're going to end with, and that is using a financial function. So let me get to a new sheet for this, and if you want to do this along with me, you're certainly welcome to do this. This financial function allows you to calculate a payment based upon at least 3 required pieces of information: the amount of money you are borrowing, the term of the loan, and how much you're paying in interest to get the payment. So I'll go ahead and put in the loan amount. I'm going to borrow, we'll put $250,000. If maybe you're borrowing money on a house, it could be a car. The term of the loan, are you doing 10 years? Is it a car? Are you doing 5 years? Whatever that might be. And then what is the interest rate? These are the required pieces of this financial function. I'm going to put in, let's see, 4.25%, and then just a title for amount. Now we're ready for the actual formula. We're ready for the formula. Now, before I do the formula for us, I want you to keep this in mind. Two very important things. That 20 that I have in B2, Excel will think that I mean 20 months if I don't compensate for that inside the formula by multiplying B2 times 12 to get the total number of months that 20 years is equal to. Then the interest rate. It is a per annum interest rate, and we're making monthly payments, so we need a way for that annual interest rate to be broken down into a monthly. So that means when I do tell Excel, hey, my interest rate's in B3, you will need to divide by 12 so it will compute it on a monthly basis. So let's get going. Equal PMT, up pops my function, and then it tells me that it wants to know, well, where's your rate of interest? Well, that's in B3. And I just got through saying that we're doing monthly payments. I need the per annum rate to be broken up into monthly, and that would require division, / and a 12. Then the comma, just like it shows in help. The NPER, the formula wants to know how many payments are you making? What's the number of payments? Well, I'm going to do 20 years, but Excel's going to think that's 20 months if you don't convert it inside the formula. B2, and that would make an awfully big payment. B2 times 12, so that the 20 will be properly computed into the total number of months that we're going to have the loan, comma. And the next one is PV, which means present value, which simply means how much money are you borrowing. Well, borrowing $250,000, which is in cell B1. Notice in help that FV, future value, and type are in brackets. You don't learn what those are today, but don't forget, brackets mean optional. So I have to have at least these three required pieces of information. And when I press enter, there's my payment. And then, of course, because all three things are referred to in the formula, you could change any one of those to do what-if scenarios of, well, what if I could do, 25 years, or what if I went less on the loan? And one final piece, we're at the top of the hour. This formula, a financial function formula, the PMT, always returns a negative value because it is a payable rather than a receivable. But if I'm going to use that formula in another calculation, the fact that it's a negative number will be a problem. So you can have the formula return as a positive value if you do this. Up in the formula bar where your formula is, if you will just add a minus symbol after the equal minus, then it will convert the number to a positive value. So drum roll, we are finished with your first look at writing formulas. I'm open for Q&A if you're ready.
Perfect. If you have questions, you can type it into the question box on the web panel or a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. One question did pop in here. When do you use the $ versus the exclamation mark in your cell references?
Now, as far as an exclamation mark goes in a formula, if I were in another spreadsheet and writing a formula, how do I want to explain this? An exclamation point indicates that you're going from a sheet to a cell. For example, let me just show you here so you can see what I mean. I think to see would be really helpful. I'll do this equal COUNTIF, for example, a moment ago. This won't take but a moment. I'm in an entirely different sheet, and I want to find out the total number of yeses. All right, so I'm going to do equal COUNTIF, open paren. Now, I don't want to have to type out the formula itself. So what I'll do is click Promotion Cell, that's the first one. Look up in my formula bar. See, it says promotion sales because it's picked up the name of the sheet because I clicked on the sheet, and there's an exclamation point. The exclamation point is the separator from the sheet to the range that you will select. Now, if I come over here to, I've got the sheet, and then I need to specify the range, and there's the range. And then I need to put in my comma so I can tell it I'm looking for the total number of yeses. And that, I think that's what you're asking me, but the exclamation point is the separator from the sheet to the range of cells within that sheet.
Perfect. I believe I've seen the exclamation point in like an actual, like in between the letter of the column and the number of the row. Would that be a different purpose that it has, or is that, am I just?
I'd have to see it, because typically you wouldn't have an exclamation point in between a cell reference. I mean, I like a literal cell, like you wouldn't see J exclamation point 2.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, a couple of the other questions that I personally had, you answered in going through the other sections of the handout, so that was fantastic. Thank you for that, Donna.
Welcome.
And we will definitely be going into more depth on some of these topics in our part 2 in a couple of weeks. So if you've already registered and are joining us for that, fantastic. And if not, and you want to take this to the next level beyond that, you can still find the details for part 2 on our website at allthingsadmin.com when you click on the Admin Tech Crash Course section. So with that, I think that wraps up today's session. We want to thank each of you for investing your time in being here with us today. We look forward to having all of you in class again very soon. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks again for being here. Have a fantastic day, everyone.